against Anish Giri with the white pieces, and here we go.
And here we go. It's not St. George's Day anymore, but it's the English opening instead.
Yay!
And Magnus Carlsen pushing his c-pawn forward. He's been kind of just experimenting with a whole variety of openings so far in the Oslo Esports Cup. And here we go. White bringing a knight out. Actually, they've had this before against each other in the past. Giri usually here pushing a pawn in the centre. And which pawn is it going to be? It looks like he's about to head for the symmetrical English. It looks like he was about to push the black c-pawn forward, but changing his mind, Anish Giri. So maybe not having expected this opening from Magnus Carlsen, he actually goes for the move I was expecting. This one, Giri has played many times before. And Magnus now going for the four knights variation of the English and a set of trades. It's called the reverse dragon, this system, because it's like a dragon Sicilian, but with reversed colours, white having an extra move. And still very well-known stuff from both players. Anish about to push the black h-pawn forward. And yeah, a theoretical battle between them. Who's done the better homework? That's the big question. Simon, do you have any experience here? You have released a chessboard course on the English opening.
Yeah, I mean, I played these positions when I was young as well, the English opening for most of my life. This is actually one of the reasons I gave up the English, this variation, from the white side. I didn't like giving away the space advantage when I had the white pieces, and you can sort of see that black already has a pawn further advanced than white, and that just wasn't something I enjoyed doing. So again, even if the opening, which is perfectly playable, and maybe even better for white, is you know, the computer says it, you've got to go for what you like playing, the kind of positions you enjoy, and I just didn't like playing these positions. Both of them very well prepared. I mean, I think they've drawn this kind of thing lots of times before, so I would be heading that way if I was going to predict a result. Maybe you, Vanka, you've got some more
I've got some stats. So up until this bishop move that Magnus just played, the two were actually repeating a game that they'd played against each other in 2019 in the Gashimov Memorial. After this bishop move, well, Magnus has never played this, but Anish has definitely faced it twice. Once against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave last year in Zagreb, and also in 2020 against Wang Hao. And, well, he has mixed memories because he lost the game to Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, but he did defeat Wang Hao with the black pieces in this particular position.
OK, interesting. So Anish clearly, having studied this position before, Magnus must have done, right? If he's raced into this position, he must have studied Anish's previous games. That's what the top players do. We talk about training camps, opening preparation. Half of it is just looking at your opponent's games, looking for weaknesses, looking for positions you think they weren't comfortable, that they didn't understand well. And, OK, after just a little bit of thought, Anish centralises his rook. Very sensible stuff so far. Black's queen in the middle of the board. Normally feeling a bit uncomfortable here, especially because white's light squared bishop is on the same diagonal. But anytime white's knight jumps out the way, attacking the black queen, using that white light squared bishop, she'll just retreat and no real harm done.
Mm-hmm. And it comes as no surprise that this is the exact same approach that he employed against Wang Hao.
When he won.
When he won, yeah. You tend to repeat those good memories.
Why mess with a winning recipe, right?
Yeah, it's probably kind of a battle of preparation, isn't it? Because you would have thought that top players will realise this. Magnus, you would have thought, I don't know if it's right or not, would know about this game that Anish has had against Wang Hao, and he would have some improvement somewhere, but that's not always the case. And he is obviously a bit under the weather, so he might not have had a chance to, you know about that game. So it's very interesting, these preparational battles, basically, for you know, this kind of encounter.
And I was just going to say, you know, chess is different than before, because before the players didn't play that much, and you could kind of memorise the few hundred games that they had played. Now the players are playing thousands of games online, and they are so flexible with their opening repertoires. You know, we saw Magnus open up with this ridiculous 1f3, and Erwin Lamy, who is Anish's second, actually said, oh no, he has to now prepare a little bit against that, just in case. So, I mean, there's so much information out there, so it's impossible just to...
We were thinking earlier on, I was about to get myself in a lot of trouble.
What were you going to do, Simon?
Well, we were sitting on the chairs. I was sitting on Anish's chair. Ivanka was sitting on Magnus's chair, just for a little photo shoot. And this is probably about I don't know, 10 minutes before the game started.
Yeah.
And we thought, what if we move the pawn to f3 on Anish's board?
And also do the same, likewise, for Magnus's board, just the mirror. And
Well, that sounds like... I've had many teachers who have done that same Simon. Yeah, I recognise that hum.
Why am I not surprised?
I do recognise that hum, definitely, yes.
but we chickened out.
But
I kind of would have liked it, though. It would be interesting to see, would they be angry? Would they smile and laugh?
And then we thought maybe expand the whole idea and do the whole room.
Yeah,
and, you know, just see whether anyone
have a
noticed.
collective laugh and laughing
Exactly.
reaction.
I mean, there's a famous story, I think I've mentioned before, but the British Championships, I think it was British, one year there was a disgruntled chess player. He'd lost a couple of games. He had some argument with the arbiter. This is going back a lot of years. And he snuck into the tournament hall in the middle of the night with a pack of super glue, and he super glued all the kings down to their squares. Might be a myth, but this is what I heard. And I'm sure it happened somewhere, probably not the British Championships. And all the players went to castle at a certain point, and they tried to lift their kings up, and all the board came up as well. It's like, someone super glued the king to the thing, and he was looking through the window, got his revenge, and then...
That's funny.
Was it you, Simon, when you say it was someone else?
No
Naughty
comments.
Simon.
Devilish
So-
idea,
Yeah.
right?
Well, would it be even possible, though, to... How would you do it if you made the 1f3 move on the board? It's a pre-move?
A pre-move.
Oh,
a
okay.
pre-move for everyone. Have them all. And
that'd be brilliant. So they actually sit down, the first move just
exactly,
just
first
played.
move go. It comes out for everyone. And it would be like pandemonium.
Yeah. And panicking and like, no.
I didn't make
take it
that move.
Yeah, probably a good thing we didn't do that, actually, in hindsight, I think.
And the arbiters would probably look at us and go, you're
No.
banned.
Yeah.
We should mention that our on-site arbiters are very, very nice people, but we wouldn't have been their favourites if we'd done that.
No.
Definitely.
No.
The arbiters keeping an eye on all the action happening inside the Oslo Esports arena, making sure everything is in order, that the players are happy, and that they get to play their music. Anish Giri, I know he's playing some sort of Dutch top something list.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And, well, it's a lot of fun and excitement in the arena. And everyone at home, we love it when you join in the action. And we also really like it when you send us your selfies. And to start everyone off, we have Heidi M. Jawa, who says that watching chess can be anywhere, even at the beach. This Sunday cannot get better. Oh, lucky you, Heidi. And keep on enjoying the show. And Anish retreating his queen. Gabrielle Coelho says, watching all these chess legends playing and commentating. Thank you very much for the nice compliment. With my young total legend.
Aww.
Very sweet picture.
Future chess player, or a current chess player, probably.
Yeah, definitely. You're current these days, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Future champion. I mean, chess is starting so young.
Yeah.
But talking about questions, there's also a question for you, Kaya.
Ooh.
Coach Casey asks, what is your favourite opening?
Didn't I have a favourite opening? I don't remember what it was anymore. The Dutch.
The English.
English. What was it?
Najdorf.
The Sicilian Najdorf. Thank you. Yes, I was going to say that. I'm not at that level, actually. Even if I follow chess now every day.
Which pawn do you pick up? Do you pick king's pawn,
yes,
queen's pawn?
usually maybe the king's pawn. No.
Do you
not king.
just
on your
like
mood.
switch?
Yeah. It's always one of the two pawns. I never do anything crazy stuff with the knights or anything. It's one of those two central pawns I will push.
No pawn to f3.
No pawn to f3, never, ever, ever.
That's
no.
good.
Because I would fall into the fool's mate. That's my problem. Yeah, no, I'm not at that level. Might surprise you, even because I do listen to the best chess players every day talk about chess. But I'm having a hard time memorizing those openings. Super hard.
Chessable. Got to get on Chessable.
I know. Yes.
That's why it's there.
Yeah.
Right.
And check out your. You have a couple courses on Chessable, right, Simon?
I got a fair few on Chessable, and the last one that came out was The Life and Times of Mikhail Tal. So it's actually him. He wrote this one, and he's one of the most interesting chess players, my favourite chess player of all time.
Yeah.
But I done 15 hours of videos on his game, so it's there's a lot of videos, and he was a great player, but he's also a very interesting character. He had, very funny guy, and had some great stories. So we try to talk a bit about that and what he did to become so great. So, yeah, but there's many courses on chessboard, something for everyone, really. So,
Absolutely, yeah. No doubt about it. We do have a few moves on the board. Is it still...
It's the calm before the storm.
Yeah, okay.
Both players just kind of marking out their territory. We haven't talked so much about the last few moves because both players were just kind of improving their pieces slowly. If you look at White's army here, it's all kind of camped out on the first 3 ranks, not really kind of pushing forward yet, not really initiating that kind of action between the two sets of forces. Black, meanwhile, spent a lot of moves with the queen. That's why we normally say don't bring your queen out too early, because Black had to use a couple moves to retreat her to a safe square, just to make sure she wouldn't get hit by a set of bishops, maybe hit by some pawns. And now Magnus, with this last pawn push, just getting ready to expand and push White's pawns forward on this left flank. We would call that a minority attack if White's pawns, the 2 pawns there, the A and B pawns, do start to push forward. There are targets as well. Black's knight, not ideally placed. Looks like it's controlling the center, but maybe a white pawn can kick it away later. And the black dark square bishop, again, looks good, but could be a target. Meanwhile, Anish Giri needs to develop his light squared bishop to a good square, maybe bring that rook out from the corner. Lots of choice for him. This pawn structure comes from the Sicilian defense, and it's really hard to handle for both sides. White has an extra central pawn, 2 versus 1, but Black has very active pieces.
I have a question for you, David, because White has kind of signalled his intention, just like you say, he's going to expand on the left side. Time to prevent it or focus on development?
I know that if Magnus Carlsen were Black here, he wouldn't hesitate, right? He would pick up Black's A pawn and push it 2 squares because he loves gaining space on all sides of the board, every flank. I would probably do the same. But maybe Anish is looking for something a bit more direct. Black, for example, does have the option of planting the knight into the center of the board, offering up some trades there. Usually that's quite a kind of safe approach for Black, if he can go for it. But Anish, I think he's debating, whether to pick up Black's A pawn, push it 2 squares, gain space, maybe bring out the Black light square bishop, or plant the Black knight in the middle.
I think a very normal idea here is to put that light square bishop on where it points at the knight, because one thing that often happens, the Black knight certainly wants to come into the centre of the board. White will probably have to take that knight off, and Black will take with the pawn. I don't know if we can show that. And you get this kind of pawn structure, right, where now Black has an open file, and you've got to try to utilise that open file and bring in a bishop out where it's kind of pointing at that weakness is also a good idea. And I think there's a strategy, actually, that in the Sicilian you see this against the dragon, which is a reversed version of this. A tempo down, which David mentioned, and it was called the Karpov variation. This is something that I think Karpov played quite often, and I know that because my friend Adam Hunt beat me with this idea once, and he told me it was the Karpov variation, but he could have been fibbing. He just beat me and pretended he was Karpov, and I was like, yeah, I believe you. But similar kind of thing happening anyway, David, here in the game.
So basically the same pawn structure we just demonstrated right there, but instead of taking with his bishop, White traded the knights off. So now it's purely bishops on. So no more tricky knight hops, no more knight forks later to worry about, but it's all about the diagonals. And White's bishops do look very good on these 2 diagonals right now. The Black queen was attacked, so Anish has found a safe square for her in the middle of the board. And she's pretty safe here right now because White really doesn't want to push pawns forward to attack the queen. This would just give away weak squares. And okay, interesting position. It's just about whether White can utilize his bishops. Right now, Black has got everything defended. And as Simon mentioned, there is a bit of a backward pawn. This is maybe a long-term target for Black because anytime it pushes forward, it's just going to get captured by the Black pawn. So yeah, it's a bit of a standoff right now. Personally, I think Magnus will be pretty happy. I was about to say that, and then I saw him on the webcam. But normally, Magnus would be pretty happy with this type of position because it's quite stabilized. There's not too much drama going on. The White King, very, very safe. And Magnus, at some point, will start pushing this pawn forward, maybe moving his bishop out the way, and then pushing the other pawn as well. But Anish, he for sure has analysed this type of pawn structure, as Simon mentioned, from a different opening maybe. Anish, after all, did do a chessboard course on the Sicilian Dragon himself. And here he's basically playing that opening just with colours reversed. So very tense position, still a lot of action yet to come. And okay, Magnus starts by choosing to offer a trade of bishops. If he can get rid of this dark square bishop, which was actually blocked in, then maybe the Black pawns will become a bit weak. For example, if we see everything fly off the board, lots of exchanges happen. Now White is the one with the targets. White's rooks get very, very active. Okay, and no trades yet. Anish says, you can do it, but on my terms. He pushes forward, and Magnus doing the same. The minority attack is coming. These two are going to undermine Black's 3 pawns over here. So, very tense middle game.
It certainly is tense and not easy for Anish. I mean, at first I was quite optimistic about Black's position. I kind of saw, well, the queen is nicely centralised. But in this next, space of few moves, Magnus is suddenly done doing his favourite thing. And when those pawns start rolling, there's going to be problems, especially along that long diagonal for the light squared bishop.
Yeah, it seems fairly typical, this kind of position for the middle game that you get here. I mean, I suppose the only odd thing from my eyes is where White's bishop is, that dark square bishop. But I agree with you, Vanka. I mean, White has this easy plan, the minority attack of opening up the light square bishop, just trying to win a pawn on the queen side. And I think this is why Anish has played the last move. He wants to try and move that bishop he's positioned into the centre to get rid of White's very strong bishop in front of his king. Yeah.
Nice move by Magnus, though, because Anish wanted to trade off the light square bishops, and Magnus is saying, oh.
Very sneaky move.
Yeah. Very sneaky, because he can go e4, right? Yeah. The bishop, that's a very good move. Otherwise, I think we should be happy. Yeah.
We have to show this on the board. Magnus looking very happy with himself after this last move. Because he's set Magnus has set a strategic trap.
Is that one of those satisfying moves to make, basically?
Yeah. Yes. And we got to show why he's so happy with himself, Magnus, there, because this is Black's plan, after all, revealed by Black's last move, putting the bishop on the square. As you guys mentioned, White's light square bishop is one of the key pieces, both from a defensive point of view, but also long-term on this diagonal. So if Black can trade these pieces off, Black is doing very, very well. But Magnus now, he'll push his pawn 2 squares forward. And en passant is possible, it's legal, but it would be a big blunder here. So normally this pawn push would be met by Black capturing, as if the pawn moved just 1 square, but now suddenly loose pieces drop off and the Black queen would fall on this diagonal. So a really interesting move there from Magnus.
Do you think they should make en passant as a rule? You have to capture it, just to mix up a little bit of chess. So if en passant is available, you have to play it.
Oh, that's
nice. That could be, because they had this, idea of trying to sort of make chess a little bit different, and that'd be quite a subtle way of making chess a little bit different, I think.
Yeah.
That means Magnus would win by force if it were this position. If Magnus could push his pawn forward, if Anish had to take it as if it moved 1 square, Anish would lose his queen by force. So.
That's a threat. E4 is actually a threat to win the queen.
A winning threat.
So it'd be...
As if chess is not difficult enough.
Yeah, just make it a bit more difficult, shall we? Yeah.
I like the fact there are no forced moves like that in chess. It's like
fair enough, yeah.
Chess is like warfare after all, and I don't know. Yeah. It's nice to have options. And okay, with that in mind, the tension between the queens being a bit too much in that variation that we just showed, Black parked the queen on a different square, and he's now maybe trying to trade off the bishops on this diagonal. Magnus meeting that by attacking the Black queen. Interesting. So he's attacking the Black queen, and if we see Black block with the bishops, how is Magnus going to keep the bishops on the board now? Maybe he won't. I'm just trying to work out his plan here.
I think Anish is still doing a very good job here. If he can get rid of the light square bishops, and then the dark square bishops will probably come off, I don't see why he should be worse. I mean, he's got the open e-file. He's keeping the balance, I think.
I think we might be... I was going to say we might be about to see a repetition of moves, but no, Magnus trades things off, and okay, he's lured the Black queen to this square because he wants to create a pin on the 4th rank.
Another example where en passant would be a force win if you had to take it. So yeah.
Again, if Black were just to make a move, for example, pushing Harry down the board, very logical. As you mentioned, Simon, pushing this pawn forward.
Wins.
If en passant was forced, of course, Black doesn't have to capture this pawn, but if he did capture it as if it moved 1 square, then whoops, the queen falls off to the white rook. And this is actually quite a common motif in lots of endgames, when to push en passant, when to kind of prepare it. You often want to trick your opponent. Often it looks like this type of pawn move is just not sensible because your opponent can take it, but you can set it up so that your opponent really can't take the bait. So interesting position. I like what Magnus has done with this idea of a pin on the 4th rank. Anish's queen may be feeling a bit uncomfortable now, stared down by the white rook.
Yeah. I really struggled with the en passant rule when I was a kid, actually. When I first started learning chess, I was really confused by it. So
I still struggle with it.
Yeah, it's quite a strange one because it's not normal that you can capture on an empty square. That kind of feels like strange. I mean, I think it's capture and passing is what it means, but it's still a bit strange.
And it happens quite rarely, so it's hard to sort of get used to it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, especially it's one of the things beginners struggle with. Definitely on pass on.
I also
just learning it. Yeah.
I also have to say castling also doesn't make that much sense either. You know, the king suddenly moves 2 squares, rook jumps over it. Like, hello.
Yeah. Why are you moving 2 pieces?
And also, I saw a great tweet the other day. It was before the tournament where someone goes, well, you know, chess players get really annoyed when people call rooks castles.
Oh.
But then we castle, you know?
Yeah.
What's the logic in that?
I did this pod thing with Dom Jolly, who's quite a famous comedian, and he was saying all chess players are snobs. They should just call it what they want. Why do they call it rooks? Why can't they call it castles? It's because you're snobs. You know, it's like, OK, we'll call it. I don't mind what we can call it. So
why the knight, not the horsey?
The horse, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like the
Yeah,
British
exactly.
version. The
Just like, you know.
And the pawn is the prawn.
Well, in the Norwegian, it's tower, which is sensible, right?
Yeah.
But what is a rook? What is
It comes
not
from
in
the
chess?
Persian word for, I think, tower, I think.
Oh, okay. So
I'm
rook
not quite sure, so
is
if
a
anyone
tower.
does know the answer, then please tweet us using #ChessChamps.
Confusing because in English a rook could also mean like a crow-like bird, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
In terms of chess, at least. But OK, meanwhile, a couple of moves. The Black Queen we mentioned was uncomfortable on that 4th rank, so she's gone back to reposition herself, and not too much else has changed. So now I'm expecting Magnus to start pushing pawns on this left flank because he's a bit stuck. Otherwise, offering up this en passant thing, it's going to remain in the position for a long time, but I don't think now. Ooh,
Still interesting, isn't it? It's still very interesting, actually. I mean, it's a theme that's coming up, David, isn't it? And now, you could think about it.
Yeah, maybe White could push a pawn forward 2 squares in the centre, hoping for en passant, but it's not forced. So, interesting moment.
But that would probably help White's position if you can move that backwards pawn, which we've noted is a weakness because it's on that open file. He's played it.
He's done it.
He's done it.
So it wasn't irrelevant, all the stuff we were talking about there. En passant is in the position.
Yeah.
So Black can actually capture this pawn as if it just moved 1 square. And to take or not to take, that is the question. It looks on Anish's screen like he is about to go for it. There we go. En passant did happen. Queen trade very quickly, and White recaptured the pawn. So still level material, but Black has a set of double pawns now on the F file. Black's weaknesses in front of his king now. Maybe hard to attack, but they are there for sure. And now Anish is about to trade off the bishops. Was he changing his mind again?
Does bishop make sense to you then? That the piece is called a bishop. It looks like a bishop.
Yeah, the bishop, I think, the bishop, queen and king, we can
I think
understand why they're called those.
But why a bishop? Why not like a laser beam? or like, arrow.
I agree with
Arrow would make more sense. A bishop is like clergy. I think that's where it comes from. So why are we moving clergymen around?
And would the bishop be a part of the war in ancient times?
Well, I think before in ancient times, the bishop was an advisor to the king. So, the bishop sits next to the king.
Okay, so that makes sense.
That's why that. But also the knight jumping over things doesn't make too much logical sense.
Well, the horse would jump.
A horse would jump over things, maybe.
Yeah, but no other piece does it.
Yeah.
Special powers. Yeah.
Send in your suggestions on Twitter.
You guys are very critical of the game of chess today, I have to say. All of you making a living and being just amazing chess players.
You've got to ask.
Be nice to the game.
You've got to ask those questions, though, haven't you? A bit of philosophy about life.
You've got to be
curious,
right?
You've got to be. Yeah, definitely. It's good to be curious.
Yeah. So you wouldn't actually say that chess is perfect?
Nothing's perfect, Claire.
I kind of think the game chess is a perfect board game. It's the perfect game, if you ask me.
I don't think we'd change anything if you asked us truthfully. I don't think we would change anything because we love it so much. But it's interesting to think of these things, and I'd love to hear the viewers' thoughts on what we should rename the pieces or
Definitely.
what rule changes you would suggest.
Yeah, good.
It would be, I think it would be kind of cool if the pawns would be a little bit different. So if the pawns could have a little bit of personality. So the A pawn has a little bit of a thing, and the B pawn, something that differs from the A pawn.
But then when they capture and go onto a new file, do they kind of change personalities?
There's actually a chess variant where they change value according to what line they're on.
Oh.
But I have to say, I really liked it when Pontus Carlsen was here, and he said that in Africa, that they often teach the kids, not necessarily with pawns. Well, they do, but they kind of don't. The value that they ascribe is in terms of animals.
Oh, that's true.
So the rooks were the rhinos. Yeah. I mean, how cool is that?
Very cool.
I think if you bring them to life, it's much easier for kids to learn about them. So that's the point. If you actually give them names, one of the points is you make them something, and kids can say, "Oh, it's I recognise that pawn. It's got a name." So it's sort of it's quite a good tool for to remember stuff, right?
So can you imagine a world championship with a chess set full of animal figurines?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, that'd be weird, wouldn't it? So,
Sorry, carry on, Simon.
I mean, I was just going to say about the position. I mean, I think this is pretty horrible for Anish. I mean, just at first glance. I mean, just because we're talking about the pawn structure, and we know that having 2 pawns doubled, I mean, it is nasty, and also it's a Magnus position, right? Magnus loves playing against small strategic problems, which Anish has. I mean, I guess we go for a nice position for white.
It's all Magnus right now, and also look at the clock times. Magnus at 11 minutes, Anish down to 2 minutes. So a 9-minute advantage for the world champion, and we know he's not feeling well, Magnus Carlsen, but this is the type of position, this is his bread and butter. This is what he's specialised in since he was young, and Anish has just got his strategy all wrong. Okay, he pushes a pawn forward now, just stopping any kind of rook checks. Maybe the white rook on the 4th rank was about to swing over, but now there is a target for the white rook, and Anish, it's really hanging by a thread for him already. Trades 1 set of rooks, but that only improves white's pawn structure. And if black's pawns on the f-file weren't doubled, if you could put one of them back on the g-file, black is completely fine, but it's just the fact that there are clear weaknesses, and Anish has gone into his opponent's home territory. Anish clearly uncomfortable. He has to use his rook to defend his pawns now on this 5th rank, but Magnus can step a pawn forward in the centre just to protect his bishop.
Looks horrible for black.
Really bad.
Really bad.
Often, I mean, I've seen openings where you give up a pawn in order to lumber your opponent with this terrible pawn structure that black has on the right side. I mean, it's so weak. Every single one of those pawns doesn't have a friend. And, the rook attacks it. But also you can visualise that the king could also be an attacker there as well.
So you've got Harry no mates and Freddie no mates as well. So
Double Freddie.
Double Freddie no mates.
Yeah, those 2 f-pawns would give Beth Harmon nightmares. And, Magnus brings his rook across, defends his bishop. Look how flexible white's pawn structure is as well. White can push pretty much any pawn if he wants to. Black's pawns are all pretty much fixed.
That's quite a clever move, because, I mean, I was with you, David, that you should, push that pawn to guard the bishop, but this way...
Concrete.
Yeah, and the white king might be able to go where the rook was just placed, I guess, is the idea.
Giri is just completely stuck, actually. He doesn't really want to trade bishops yet, because in a pure rook endgame, his pawns would be even weaker. Black's rook is stuck on the 5th rank, just doing a defensive job, so he has to play with his king alone. And as Simon mentioned, it's very easy for white to actually improve the king as well. First, he's going to push pawns. He's going to try and kind of force Giri to trade off these bishops. I mean, Magnus, he's barely thinking. This is the type of position he can just play purely on instinct. There's zero calculation involved. It's just, OK, where do I want my pawns? Where do I want my pieces? And even if you're really unwell, you can play a position like this. Even if you're really tired, you can play a position like this. Giri, meanwhile, clearly uncomfortable with 2 minutes left.
Oh, wow.
And, I mean, it's purely defensive. He's trying to kind of fight for the draw from move 1 now in Giri in this game, but it's backfired. And Magnus, look at the evaluation bar. Big advantage for him.
OK, interesting. Will Magnus Carlsen win game 2 here? He has a lot of time on the clock. In the other 3 matches, the bar actually is very much to the middle in all our matches. So will we have a little bit of a drawish round? It's going to be interesting to see. So far in the tournament, a lot of decided games, so that is super fun and entertaining. And Magnus fighting for a win in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to say now I'll be shocked if Magnus doesn't win this. I know he's not feeling 100%, but just look at his last few moves. He pushed a pawn forward in the centre, solidifying everything. And now the white king kind of making its way towards those isolated, weak, doubled black pawns. At his choosing, he can push a pawn on the other side to kick black's bishop away, force it to trade itself off for white's bishop. The black bishop can never run away from that trade because white's bishop would just go and grab a pawn. Giri's just completely stuck. He just has to wait and do nothing and hope that there's no breakthrough. But
the hardest thing in chess is to do nothing, right?
Exactly.
I mean, this is what is well known when you, especially when you're in a worse position. You know, it's much more natural to try and do something. You know, so yeah, I think this is another problem that Anish is going to have here, right?
And with the clock situation, I mean, the temptation, the human instinct, right, is to lash out at some point and calculate your way out of danger, do something, but he can't.
Yeah. And especially if Magnus is sneaky and gives him a chance to break out, but it was a false promise. Okay, so the bishops have been traded. We did speak about that, you know, that there is the urge to do something. The bishops are off. Which pawn should capture the bishop? Both of them kind of look nice.
Both look nice. I would capture towards the centre, using the white B pawn to capture inwards.
You can maybe think about the rook, king and pawn ending, possibly, I guess, or...
The only thing that will make Magnus pause is capturing with the white rook, offering a rook trade, but he's got to be 100% sure there that he's winning. So you don't go into a king and pawn endgame unless you've calculated every single detail, and maybe it wasn't so easy for white to create a passed pawn in that endgame. And suddenly Magnus looking up. Is he just meditating?
Maybe he's thinking, like, how do I break this down? Because there's that famous thing where you've got to have two weaknesses, and how does white actually break through this position? I mean, he doesn't have many ways to get into black's structure. Black has a couple of weaknesses, as you know, the double pawns, the pawn on the half-open file, but how do you actually break through?
Yeah, and that's, as we saw Magnus looking up, now he's just recomposed himself, and you mentioned, Simon, two weaknesses. This one, it's the backward pawn. White's going to attack it soon, and for example, if black just makes a move, this will tie down the black rook. Okay, the black rook's actually gone back already to defend this pawn, preempting that. The other potential weaknesses are these ones, but the black king is holding them for now. So really interesting. Okay, Magnus, okay, we are actually heading towards this position. Magnus, he does have that question. Is he going to, for example, reroute his king around this way to attack this pawn on the edge of the board, which is isolated? Is he going to maybe maneuver his king around the other way and then free up his rook? For example, in a situation like this, if black just waits, maybe bring his rook back, swing this rook across this way, and kind of overload the black army. Anish, meanwhile, just has to move back and forth. Sitting on his hands. He's doing that, but 30 seconds maybe 10 minutes.
Maybe there's an a6 break. Black can play a6 first.
Yeah.
Of course, but
I think that's a nice waiting move to have that in advance, just in case black also was tempted to push the pawn to a6. One idea that I had was to kind of, first of all, just do some magic with your rook. Just reroute it to the F line as David showed. Oh, I didn't expect the pawn to be pushed.
Well, I think he had to play, otherwise white was going to play a6.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting white to do that. I thought white might have it in reserve.
Yeah.
And now black is actually completely stuck. Black's king is tied down, defending this pawn. It can't move. Black just has to move his rook back and forth on this 7th rank. It's just going to use these squares and wait. And, OK, Magnus, he's going the other way around now. What is his plan? He's forced black to kind of fix his pawns on these squares. But what's next for Magnus? That's the big question. We know that Magnus doesn't believe in fortresses, but Anish Giri has tried to set up a fortress. He's hoping that white can't break through. And, OK, white is just waiting. Anish is just going to rotate with his rooks back and forth, as we mentioned. So fortress or no fortress? That is the question.
I don't think it's a fortress.
I think, I think white should better break through here, because white's still got some pawn breaks. I mean, white has these two pawns in the centre, which can potentially move, especially the D pawn, and he's just maybe at the right moment going to play this. And I like the idea you showed earlier, David, of bringing the white rook to the F file, hitting those double pawns, and then maybe you transfer the king the other way.
Yeah.
Still got to be one, but it's certainly not a fortress yet.
Also, your idea of actually breaking in the centre looks also quite dangerous as well. Do them all.
Yeah, just time them well, I think. And look at the time advantage. Well, Anish is down to 40 seconds now, which is pretty pretty bad.
Yeah, so these are long-term plans Magnus has to formulate over the next 5-6 moves. But yeah, it's going to be hard for Anish. Every move, Magnus is going to start creating tiny little mini threats, and Anish is going to have to burn his time trying to counter them.
Yeah. Is this a situation as well where it's easy to make inaccuracies that can just ruin the whole thing for Anish?
Maybe not this exact moment, but maybe in 5 or 6 moves' time, once Magnus has started to create those threats. First, Magnus is just improving his king. Then he'll improve his rook. And then the threats might start to come, or the pawn breaks at least, as you guys mentioned.
So it's looking super dangerous for Anish Giri. Clock ticking down to 20 seconds in game 2 against Magnus Carlsen. The first game was a draw. Okay.
Yeah, look at what Anish is doing. Just king up, king back, king up, king back.
It's horrible playing that, isn't it? When you know just waiting for your own doom in some respects, especially when you're playing Magnus. It's like, oh dear.
But on the other hand, there's some kind of joy in the fact that you don't have to think too much. You just shuffle the king backwards and forwards.
If you don't want to think too much, you should probably be playing drafts and not chess, shouldn't you?
Oh, Simon, your move is on the board.
The breakthrough has happened. Is it the right moment? That's the big question. And Giri clearly surprised by that because it looks like White's giving up a pawn. And, OK, he's not going to take this pawn off the board. Oh, he is. That pawn was just too strong. You couldn't let it march forward. But now this is the point. The White king has entered the game. And Magnus has timed it pretty well, I think, because the Black king is offside. Black's king is kind of on the wrong part of the board right now. And, oh, Giri, look at that. He clicked on his rook, clicked on his king. Under 10 seconds. He's not sure what to do.
Oh, he took a passive decision as well. Ooh.
The white rook is in now. The white rook is in the black camp.
And White can actually think about advancing the c-pawn 1 square forward. And,
I don't like that move. I thought the Black king had to come back towards, but...
I think White might even offer a rook trade if he wants.
Yeah,
and just
nice.
win Black's pawn in the centre. Black is temporarily a pawn up, but look how many weaknesses Black has. OK, he does go for this pawn push. Magnus is rushing slightly. I'm slightly concerned about that for him, but he's created a pass pawn. White's a pawn now is a runner. And, OK, Black trying to get active with his rook.
Yeah, I have to say, Magnus did rush it because now this is a nice move by Anish because he's getting ready to check the king on the e4 square and then get the rook behind the pawn. And there you see, he really made a very fast move, pre-move.
Yep, so Black's rook giving check and Magnus, wow, rushing towards his pawn. So it's now a race. It's about whether White's pawn is quick enough to run up the board. Black's rook might have to give itself up for that, but it's just about whether the Black king can start doing its own damage. Magnus decided not to go and grab pawns himself. He's banking on this one guy, Alice the a-pawn, running up the board, and Magnus's king is now going to go and support this pawn. I'm very surprised Magnus is playing so quickly because there's so much to calculate here. It's pretty much a race, any race, pawn races especially. It's all about I do this, you do that, I do this, you do that. And this type of position, you can calculate 10 moves in advance because every move is pretty much forced. But Magnus is just clearly playing by instinct.
And he seems to be making the right moves. The bar is liking it. He is sick. How impressive is it that he's able to play like this?
I don't know. This is bad strategy, actually. We tell our students off for playing like this because he's not using the clock. And now you can see a pawn race. I mean, it might work because Anish only has just under a minute on the clock, but...
Is he going to bring his rook back and challenge the black rook?
Yeah, he is. That's a nice tactic.
It's going to get really complicated. But yeah, OK, there we go. This rook offers itself up, but it's purely to distract Black's rook away from defending the White a-pawn promoting. So if the White rook is captured, White will make a new queen. It's still complicated there, but... I
think Anish might have, that might have been a mistake as last move because he doesn't really want to lose this pawn. It's such a trump. I mean...
And you saw Anish put his head in his hands, as you say that, Simon.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think we're saying maybe Magnus is rushing, but he's the best endgame player of all time. He knows exactly what positions to aim for. And he's probably just playing a winning plan, and he realises that a-pawn's so strong. I don't know. Maybe he could have calmed down a little bit.
But he was only just in time, Magnus, by 1 move.
Yeah.
5 seconds for Anish.
OK, 5 seconds, and he takes the White rook. White makes a new queen, and it's queen versus rook. Black's pawns are all a bit loose as well, so no fortress in this game. It's just about whether Black's far advanced pawn can promote later. OK, he's pushing it, but White can stop that pawn with his queen. White can give a check or two first if he wants as well. Oh, this feels like it's winning now for White.
It does, doesn't
it? Look at the bar as well, saying 4.8 advantage for Magnus Carlsen in game 2. And the clock is ticking so fast for Anish Giri. Incredible, the time difference here.
Yeah, White can just give a check, force the Black king back. So go to the g8 square. OK, that has happened there. And now just go back and stop this Black pawn in the centre. You want to stop it from behind. That's the best way to stop pawns. There we go. And actually a couple of pawns now under fire. Black's pieces aren't coordinated. If the Black king was near the rook and near this very strong pawn, then maybe Black could save the game, but the Black king just too far away. It's hopeless now for Anish.
And I think we're going to see a result, actually.
Do you think he's going to resign?
Yeah, because pawns are going to be dropping off. In case if he gives a spite check, okay, king will move. But still, the problem persists. There's 2 pawns on prise. The pawn on the f6 square and the far advanced pawn. And now well, all he has to do is just move his king to attack the rook, and he's done that. 12 seconds.
No more checks for black. Black has to put his rook on a passive square. The black pawn drops, and now it's just a matter of time. The white queen is going to overpower the black rook. She has easy routes into the black position. Black's pawns are just too weak. It's hopeless now for Giri.
Ooh. Is he about to resign, Anish Giri? Ah.
I think any moment. The black rook also has no safe squares to park itself on. Okay, it goes active, and Anish taking his earphones out. He's getting ready to give up. One more move, the queen will attack the black pawns, and that's game over.
Yep. It's looking like Magnus Carlsen will take the first point in this match against Anish Giri. Game 2 with the white pieces. But Anish Giri, he keeps playing.
Okay, a couple of last moves here.
I suppose his only hope is to get something like queen versus rook, nothing else on the board, which is still winning for white, but it's a bit tricky to win.
Yeah, I think he's just going through the motions. It's the
Yeah,
most painful thing, just to resign. And Magnus has all the time in the world, actually. Magnus can sit here and wait for 5 minutes and let him suffer.
Are the players allowed to go and have a walk? Maybe he could go and just chill out a little bit, go and get some sushi. Oh, his legs are there, yeah, he's about to go. That's it. Yeah.
That's it. It's over. Magnus Carlsen takes the lead in the match against Anish Giri.